8:13, welcome back to Breakfast Television, a live shot from Queen Elizabeth Park this morning. I know it's Friday, but there is something very serious going on in our town regarding our children's safety. I'm new to BT, but if you're not familiar with my family life, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm sure, Dr. Shimi Kang, that I am not alone in our city this morning with dealing with that issue of how do you talk to your kids about personal safety. We have a 13-year-old girl who has been found in park. A lot of mystery surrounding this, a lot of confusion, and the Burnaby RCMP have been telling us to talk to our kids about personal safety. But how do we do this when we have maybe a kid that's 4 and a kid that's 13? So welcome back to the program. Thanks for joining us on short notice. How do we start that conversation with kids who are super tiny?
You know, you're so right, Terry Jean. I have 3 kids, and I was actually having this conversation yesterday with all 3 of them in a whole group. And every child reacts differently, but the conversation needs to happen. It needs to happen multiple times in multiple ways. With younger kids, we want to really actually get away from this notion of stranger danger. I know that's kind of the one that often is out there, but in fact, we know that most people who assault or harm children are children that the child knows, and in fact often knows quite well. So some general guidelines: no one's allowed to touch you where your bathing suit is. Don't go to anyone's house or car without checking in with your parents first. And really importantly, with little kids, because they're so innocent and trusting, telling them they're not allowed to keep secrets from their parents, tell their parents everything. It's not tattling. Many young kids don't speak up because they're afraid they're tattling, or someone's told them that don't tell your parents, otherwise they'll be harmed. So all of those things we want to talk to little young kids about.
The thing that I took away from that immediately was that you have to have these conversations more than once. Yesterday with my son Oz in the car, I started having what I felt like was an awkward conversation, but I knew it needed to happen, and he rolled his eyes at me and went, "You talked to me about this before, Mom." And I thought, that's good that he remembered the last time I had spoken with him about that. Can we move forward to maybe older children? The girl who died in Burnaby was 13 years old. What can we tell our kids who are prepubescent, just entering the world of teenagerdom?
Yeah, so all the similar stuff, but now with more concepts, because they are becoming more independent, they're venturing out alone. You want them to establish a buddy system. This is good for adults too. Don't go anywhere alone, especially at night, especially if there's areas that can be hidden. Cell phones often give a false sense of security. Sometimes we as parents think, oh, they have a cell phone. But if the child is looking down or engrossed in a text message, they're not aware of their surroundings. So if your teenager has a cell phone, you really want to set some parameters about walking, looking around, checking neighborhoods and areas before you walk in, not having your head down on the phone. Even things like pepper spray and personal alarms are things that people use, I know, in inner cities and dangerous communities. So with the older child, and self-defense, actually learning some self-defense strategies and techniques can all be applied.
And self-defense classes could help give you a sense of confidence, because I know one of the big concerns from parents and myself as well is I don't want to instill a spirit of fear in my children, especially when it comes to having conversations like this and something happening in our city right now. So what can we do, and how can we phrase this sort of conversation to make sure that they do have confidence rather than fear moving forward?
That is such a good point, because we don't want fearful children, and in fact studies show that those children who look scared or lost or confused in public settings are more often preyed upon. So you want your child to look confident and to feel confident, because fundamentally confidence leads to problem solving. It leads to them in that moment making strategic choices. So the message is caution, not fear, with confidence and optimism. Even though there's cases like this, we really want to give the message that in general the world is a safe place, that these are rare instances, and to balance the caution and being aware with a general sense of optimism and trust. So we know that kids who do go to, in fact, a stranger and say, "I'm in trouble," in general, that's often a positive thing for them to do, as opposed to be struggling alone. So we want to give them that sense of optimism and trust in public safety.